Hi, my name is Emma and I'm 20 years old. My life has been anything but ordinary lately. I live with my mom and my stepfather, Paul, in a cozy little house on the edge of town. At first glance, it might look like a typical blended family setup, but reality is a bit more complicated. Paul entered my life when I was just a teenager, and I was initially skeptical of him. He was different from the kind of father figure I was used to. My mom had been through a tough divorce, and I had built walls around myself, determined not to get too close. Paul, though, was patient. He never pushed too hard to be part of my life. He just offered a steady presence that felt comforting. Over time, I found myself appreciating his company. He was always supportive, encouraging my passions, and helping me make sense of the turbulent teenage years. But recently, something had shifted between us, a change I couldn't quite name. One quiet Saturday, I found myself lying on my bed, overwhelmed by loneliness. I had recently gone through a breakup with my first boyfriend, Nick, who I thought was the one. Catching him flirting with someone else at a party shattered me, leaving a raw ache in my heart. I lay there staring at the ceiling, letting the weight of everything sink in as soft music played in the background. My mom had gone out for errands, leaving just Paul and me at home. Usually, I cherished the peace and quiet of having the house to myself, but that day felt different. I wanted someone close, someone to talk to. My phone buzzed with messages from friends, but I couldn't bring myself to reply. Just then, Paul knocked lightly and stepped into my room. "Hey, Emma, you doing okay?" he asked, his voice warm and calm. My heart raced a little. "I'm fine," I replied, trying to sound casual. "Just fine." He leaned against the doorframe, his face softening with concern. "You know you can talk to me if you need to. I'm here for you." There was something genuine in his tone that made me feel safe. I sighed and for the first time found myself opening up to him about the breakup. I told him how hurt I felt, the sense of betrayal, the heartache I couldn't seem to shake. Paul listened, nodding as I spoke, never once interrupting. "It's okay to feel hurt," he said softly when I finished. "Breakups are tough, but you're strong, Emma. You're going to get through this." His words touched something deep within me, and I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. But there was also an unfamiliar tension in the air. The next morning at breakfast, I couldn't shake the thoughts from my mind. As I poured myself a cup of coffee, I noticed Paul watching me. His gaze lingered a moment too long, and I felt a strange flutter in my stomach. "You're really talented," he said suddenly, breaking the silence. "I saw some of your sketches in the living room. You have a real gift." "Thanks," I murmured, feeling my cheeks warm under his steady gaze. Something about the way he looked at me felt different, but I couldn't place it. Over the days that followed, we began to share more time together. Casual conversations became deeper, touching on our dreams, fears, and everything in between. He started joining me in the living room after dinner to watch movies or talk about my artwork. He was my stepfather, but I found myself seeing him in a new light, one that was both thrilling and confusing. One afternoon, I was sitting on the couch, sketching, when Paul came in and sat beside me. Our shoulders brushed, and I felt an electric jolt run through me. "What are you working on?" he asked, his voice low and steady. "Just some sketches for my portfolio," I replied, trying to keep my composure. I could feel his gaze on me, his eyes tracing every line I drew. His closeness felt both comforting and terrifying. Then, in a moment that felt both surreal and inevitable, he leaned in. Our faces were inches apart, and time seemed to pause. Without thinking, I leaned in too, our lips meeting in a soft, tentative kiss. It was a kiss filled with confusion and longing, a moment that crossed a boundary we had never before dared to approach. As the weeks went by, the bond between Emma and Paul deepened, creating an unspoken understanding that hung in the air. They shared glances across the room, small smiles that only they understood, and brief touches that left both of them breathless. Their connection was something they both cherished and feared, knowing they had to keep it hidden, especially from Emma's mother. They found small ways to spend time together without raising suspicion. Late-night drives to look at the stars, quiet afternoons sketching in the park, all became sacred spaces where they could be themselves. With each meeting, their conversations grew deeper, turning into shared hopes and dreams about the future. Realizing the importance of honesty, Emma and Paul decided to be open about their feelings when they were alone, hoping to understand the complexity of what they were feeling. One evening, as they sat together in the living room, an atmosphere thick with unspoken words, Paul broke the silence. "Emma," he said, his voice soft but resolute, "I want you to know that I'm here for you no matter what. But we have to be honest about this, about how we're feeling." Emma looked at him, a mix of relief and uncertainty in her expression. "I appreciate that, Paul," she said quietly. "I just don't want anyone to get hurt, especially Mom." They talked late into the night, sharing their fears, doubts, and the implications of what was between them. This commitment to open dialogue created a safe space for both of them, allowing them to express themselves without judgment. It was this openness that kept their connection alive, even as they both knew the risks involved. Despite their efforts to keep things under control, moments of doubt began to surface. Emma would find herself wondering if she was simply mistaking admiration for love, while Paul wrestled with the consequences of their relationship. One afternoon, while working on an art project together, Emma paused, her face clouded with concern. "Paul, what if this is all just temporary? What if I'm confusing love with admiration?" Paul looked at her, his eyes filled with understanding. "I don't think it's temporary, Emma," he said, his voice steady. "But it's natural to question it. I know this is complicated." This conversation forced them both to confront the reality of their feelings and the risks involved. As time went on, the tension between them grew, building towards something neither of them fully anticipated. They had created a world where they felt alive, but the weight of their situation loomed larger each day. One evening, as they sat close on the couch watching a movie, their hands brushed, and both felt the familiar spark. Paul turned to Emma, his voice barely a whisper. "I can't keep pretending that this isn't real." Emma's heart pounded and she replied, "I feel the same way." The moment was electric, filled with both possibility and danger. Eventually, this tension reached a breaking point. They were preparing dinner together one evening, laughing and sharing playful banter, when they found themselves inches apart in the kitchen. Their eyes met, and without thinking, they leaned in for a kiss, more passionate this time, a culmination of all the emotions they had kept locked away. It was a kiss filled with yearning, fear, and a shared hope that they could somehow make sense of it all. But as quickly as it happened, reality set in. They both pulled back, realizing the magnitude of what they had just done. "Emma, we can't let this get out of hand," Paul said, his tone serious. "I care about you deeply, but we need to think about the consequences." "I know," Emma replied, feeling the weight of their situation. "But how do we go back to the way things were? I don't want to lose what we have." They knew that if they wanted to keep their relationship intact, they would have to be extremely careful. Their secret moments together became even more precious, as they both tried to find a way to balance their connection without endangering their lives and relationships. Yet, as their bond grew, it became harder to manage. Emma's mother began to notice small changes, subtle shifts in the dynamics between Emma and Paul. One evening, she pulled Emma aside, concern written all over her face. "Emma, is there something going on between you and Paul?" she asked, her voice filled with worry. Caught off guard, Emma stammered, "No, Mom. It's nothing. We're just close." "Close?" Her mother raised an eyebrow. "It feels like more than that. You can tell me if there's something you need to talk about." Emma felt a wave of panic rising within her. She knew she had to handle this delicately to protect both her relationship with Paul and her bond with her mother. In the weeks that followed, Emma and Paul tried to establish clearer boundaries, even as they found it painful to pull away from each other. They spent less time together during family activities, doing their best not to draw any more attention. Emma threw herself into her art, using it as an outlet for her emotions, painting and drawing images that reflected her inner turmoil. Paul, too, focused on his own hobbies, finding solace in his own projects while struggling to keep their connection alive. They continued to steal moments together, whispered words of encouragement, shared glances, and the comfort of knowing that they were in this together. With each passing day, they grew closer, their bond evolving into something that felt both fragile and beautiful. They knew the path ahead would be filled with challenges, but they were determined to face them together, holding on to the knowledge that their connection was real and worth exploring. As the months passed, Emma and Paul grew more adept at concealing their relationship, but the weight of their secret pressed down on them. Each hidden glance and fleeting touch became both a joy and a burden, adding layers of complexity to their lives. They had managed to maintain the facade, but Emma's mother remained suspicious, watching them more closely with each passing day. One evening, Emma's mother sat her down, her expression serious. "Emma," she began, choosing her words carefully, "I can't help but feel there's something going on that you're not telling me. You and Paul, it's like there's a wall between us." Emma felt her chest tighten, sensing her mother's distress. "Mom, I promise there's nothing wrong. We're just close." She struggled to keep her tone even, her mind racing to reassure her mother while protecting her relationship with Paul. But the pressure was taking its toll. That night, Emma confided her fears to Paul. "What if she finds out?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't want to hurt her." Paul nodded, his face etched with worry. Maybe we need to reconsider this, Emma," he said softly, though it was clear the thought pained him. "I care about you more than I can say, but if it means keeping peace in this family." Emma's eyes filled with tears. The thought of letting go felt unbearable, yet she knew they couldn't go on like this forever. They spent the next few weeks in quiet reflection, gradually spending less time together and trying to find a way to transition back to a more conventional relationship. One chilly evening, they met one last time at their favorite spot, a quiet park by the lake, the place where they had shared so many of their dreams and secrets. They sat in silence, each absorbing the moment and trying to savor the time they had left. Paul finally broke the silence, his voice steady. "Emma, no matter what happens, I want you to remember that you're one of the most incredible people I've ever known. I'll always be here for you, even if things are different." Emma nodded, her voice catching. "I feel the same way, Paul. I'll always be grateful for what we shared." With a final embrace, they parted ways, each carrying a mix of sorrow and gratitude, knowing they had experienced something rare and transformative. It wasn't the ending they had envisioned, but they had found a way to honor both their love and the bonds that held their family together.